All right, thank you everyone for coming today. That was interesting. All right, so we're called to order here at 10 o'clock. We're going to take the agenda in the order that's listed, but before we start, I do have a couple of bits of information that I'd like to relay to everyone, both on the commission and elsewhere, just to let you all know essentially what's going on, as I was the one that set this meeting. So I continue to keep policy group meetings timely, efficient, and effective. Every decision made by the policy group has been a measured decision calculated as being the least restrictive means of ensuring public health and safety. The policy group has adopted measures to the situation as it's unfolded. We've neither imposed a stay-at-home order nor turned a blind eye and set every man for himself. No one on the policy group or here wants to infringe on citizens' rights to live their lives as they choose. So the less is more approach is clearly what our freedom-loving citizens want to see and what we've been trying to deliver. All but one of the policy group motions that were voted upon have passed unanimously, and in a way I'm actually happy that the one vote which wasn't unanimous and passed by a simple majority was voted on in that fashion. I'll explain why. It's heartening to see that despite the county's organizational hierarchy, that county staff felt comfortable enough to vote their conscience instead of cloning their direct supervisors' votes. Right or wrong, that speaks volumes about county staff's desire to do its best for our community, and I truly do commend that. At the last Board of County Commissioners meeting on Tuesday of this week, March 24th, some members of the BOCC indicated a desire to have input in the decisions made by the policy group. As I stated during that meeting on Tuesday, I welcome BOCC input where it's possible to have it, but there may be decisions which simply don't allow enough time for such input to be received. At the time of that Tuesday commission meeting, multiple commissioners, including myself, were operating under the incorrect assumption that emergency BOCC meetings could be called within an hour or two's notice. After this meeting, the Tuesday meeting, in verifying the notice requirements, I learned that we need at least 24 hours of notice even to convene an emergency meeting of the BOCC. Policy group meetings have regularly been set to occur on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the morning. Based upon an urgent call and email from the cities that I received yesterday, at noon on Wednesday, March 25th, I directed staff to convene an emergency meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. At noon on Wednesday, March 25th, I unilaterally directed staff to convene an emergency meeting of the BOCC today at 10 a.m. as we're here. This was done so as I anticipated that the policy group call scheduled for 9:50 this morning could well involve a proposal to shut down the beaches. Setting the BOCC meeting for 10 a.m. would allow me to recess the policy group meeting to come here to get the input of the commission to bring back to the policy group. However, as they say, the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. I don't consider myself a mouse, but it seems to apply nonetheless. To that end, on Thursday, March 26th, I received a call from Scott Morgan, the West Melbourne City Manager, requesting that I convene an emergency meeting of the policy group that same day, yesterday, to discuss the closure issue. As I have yet to refuse to convene an emergency meeting of the policy group upon any member's request, I did so and set the meeting for 3 p.m. that day, yesterday, Thursday. When I spoke with Scott, I initially asked him to preface any motion he might make with the following language: absent action from the Board of County Commissioners to the contrary. After sending out this proposed language to the policy group, it was pointed out to me that such language would make implementation by 11 a.m. today an impossibility, even were the County Commission to take action immediately upon convening this morning at 10. Even if we were to disregard the unambiguous request from our partners with the cities, and somehow we could implement countywide beach closures in the span of less than an hour, getting notice out and messaging the majority of our residents and visitors would be impossible in that short time. Moreover, there was a fear with stay-at-home orders going into effect that people would already have been driven here by the time the commission could address the matter, fleeing those counties that have stay-at-home orders. At the 3 p.m. policy group meeting yesterday, Scott made it clear that regardless of the decision, that the cities were unanimous in wanting the issue decided yesterday and not waiting until today to have the action taken. It was also stated at that time and during that meeting that at a minimum, both Cocoa Beach and Satellite Beach were going to shut down their beaches, with the understanding that they were holding off on doing that to allow the policy group to take uniform action, but that it would happen nonetheless. As I understand it, this prevents the problem that I've most dreaded since this started, having some beaches closed with others open, amplifying the density of people on the remaining open stretches of beach. Keep in mind that Canaveral National Seashore and Sebastian Inlet have both been and remain totally closed. Patrick Air Force Base has kindly indicated it will do whatever we do and match our policies. The beach closures from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends focus on the times that tourists are most likely to visit the beach, and it should allow, or it's hoped to allow, locals to walk the beaches in the mornings and evenings during the weekend and use them as usual during the week. This is something that tourists are less likely to drive here in order to do, given the limited hours and the fact that the hours aren't in the peak times of the day. As News 6 reported, I believe yesterday or this morning, the action taken by the policy committee is in compliance with a recent executive order issued by our governor, Ron DeSantis, asking all beachgoers to practice social distancing and avoid large gathering on our beaches. Having a uniform policy of closing beaches or keeping them all open allows for more consistent messaging to the public with respect to all beaches operating under the same policy within our 70-some-odd miles of coastline. And I want folks to keep in mind as well that what was voted on was a 3-day trial run. This is not necessarily something that's going to be in effect for the following weekend. It could be expanded, it could be left in place, it could be reduced, it could be eliminated. I do want to address a couple of other things that came up that may be a little bit less comfortable. With that said, I think they do need to be addressed. Regardless of my own opinion, it's been expressed to me by more than one member of the policy group that the county commission may be, in a way, intruding in matters not belonging to the county commission under our own emergency management plan. When I was asked what particular action or actions the policy group has taken with which the county commission either was uncomfortable or didn't support, I was at an absolute and total loss, as I haven't heard any specific criticism either at the prior meeting or elsewhere from any of my fellow commissioners on anything that the policy group has voted to do, which the commission would have either done differently or not at all. And one member of the policy group, who I prefer not to throw under the bus by naming publicly, as I enjoy a good working relationship with the individual, politely asked that I request staff give us a little bit of history on the emergency management plan and the purpose of the policy group with respect to its being able to take swift action. So before we go to public comment, I'd respectfully ask that our public safety director, Matt Wallace, or alternatively, if he'd prefer, one of our assistant county managers provide a little bit of background, including the traditional role of the commission with respect to the policy group for those of us that may be fuzzy or rusty. I appreciate it, sir.
Yes, sir. Matthew Wallace, Director of Public Safety for Brevard County. I want to say up front, I've only been in this job for about 1.5 years, so the history that I have started with Hurricane Dorian and has gone through, obviously, with what we're going through, the pandemic today. The authorities of the policy group are derived from the Comprehensive Emergency Management Plan, the CEMP, that is approved by the Commission. Those authorities expressly give the policy group the decision-making body to quickly react to situations in an emergency situation that needs to be done in the best interests of the county. The chair of the county commission is selected to be the chair of the policy group that leads that group and tees up topics much like we do in the commission. The policy group is very focused only on the emergency at hand. We don't overstep our bounds into county policies on a normal day-to-day basis. We really only react and focus on the emergencies at hand to make sure we put the county and the citizens of Brevard in a better place, in a better, safer place. And we look forward to whatever contingencies or threats come in the future so we can posture the county and be prepared for those things as they happen. Jim, who's been around here much longer than me?
Matt summed it up pretty well. The one thing I'd added, the policy group is, Beginning of when it's called up, it's a reaction of a upcoming disaster or an event, and then it's focus. Prepare yourself, and then the focus is on the backside is how to get ourselves back to normal operations. But other than that,
Jim, let me ask if you could add, or Matt, if you'd prefer either. What has been, to your understanding, and Jim, since you've been here quite a bit longer, it may be better to direct the question to you. What has been the role of the county commission with respect to that, and how is the county commission seen to traditionally be involved with respect to decisions of the policy group?
To be honest, Commissioner, most of my, up until the last few years with the policy group has been on the evacuation side of the world, working in the transit department. We talk about evacuation and moving supplies. That's when I've been involved on it. And Hurricane Irma, that was the last one, right? Hurricane Irma they all run together after a while. Dorian, jeez. Dorian, it's because the policy group meets because, you may have weeks between county commission meetings. You may have to work together with the law enforcement in the cities if you got to do evacuation or opening up shelters, so we all have to cooperate. So that's, the policy group is to bring everyone together so we can cooperate and go out with one message and that we'll all work together in response to the emergency.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jim. So, certainly I'm happy to go to public comment, and then we can get all of the commission members. Thanks, Matt. I appreciate it, sir. Then we can get all the commission members' input if they'd like to do it that way. Would that work? Commissioner Pritchett? Commissioner Tobias? All right. Any objection from my two colleagues on the phone? All right. Hearing none, we'll go to public comment. Yeah, so this is going to be a little bit different. I would ask for a motion to waive our typical pink card rule. All right, motion from Commissioner Tobias. I'll second it. All in favor of waiving our pink card rule, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you. No, Commissioner Tobias pointed out that our county attorney suggested we do basically roll call votes to ensure that everything's clear for the record. So let's go ahead and we'll do it by roll. Commissioner Pritchett? Commissioner Smith? Aye. Commissioner Isnardi? Aye. Commissioner Tobias? Yes. And I'll be yes, so that's unanimous. All right, perfect. So I'll defer to staff in terms of how we have public comment set up today. I know it's a little bit different this morning than it was in the past.
Yes, right now you have two to speak on the first item, and if you look on your screen, you can see we're having them in Building B, and I believe they'll be coming up. There's literally X marks the spot, and they'll be speaking to you on TV.
I like that.
Yep.
Good job, guys. All right, let's go for it. And if everyone would just state their name and their city of residence, you don't need to go through the whole address. That's fine.
A member of the Solid Waste Management Department. The reason I came here today on one thing, I read an article in Florida today that Brevard County has enough ventilators. Hospitals say but won't give numbers. There is one hospital group that did give numbers, and that's Parish. But Stewart and Health First didn't give any number on the ventilator. Through my experience in life, when people are evasive with answers, that always gives me pause to say why. I know that you don't have the authority to do it, but I think, given this situation, if you did ask Health First and Stewart how many ventilators they have, it may answer that question. Because if you look around the country, especially in areas like New York City, they don't have enough. And right now, if you look around and you drive around our county, you will see there's an awful lot of New York license plates in this county. So I don't know how this is going to affect us. And given the fact that Solid Waste Management Department is also a group that's idle, and we are all here at work, and we will stay here. I just like to know if we do have enough ventilators, in our hospitals, and if we don't, what can we do to make sure that we get them if we need them?
Let me just briefly address that if I could, and I'll share with you what I know, and I don't claim to know what's either unknowable or what's unknown to me, but I have been in touch with folks with Health First. I've been in touch with FDOH's administrator here in Brevard, and my understanding, and it could have simply been that this wasn't contemplated as falling within the scope of the supplies that we discussed. So I'll put that out there as a qualifier. But my understanding is the two areas of concern with respect to our potentially either running out or running low on supplies pertain to the collection and testing kits for COVID, and then secondarily, far secondarily, I should say, is getting PPE or BSI, so personal protective equipment or body substance isolation, namely gloves, N95 masks, or even N100 masks, things of that nature. The ventilator question has not come up here. I don't know if that's a reflection thus far on the ages of those that have confirmed diagnoses, or if it's simply that we don't have the issues that are being experienced in New York. But what I can tell you is I will touch base later today with Maria Stahl, the administrator of FDOH. She's got my cell phone number. I've got her cell phone number. I've been speaking with her. I believe it's been every day, if not more often, over the past week, week and a half, maybe even 2 weeks at this point. So I will reach out to her and see if there is a thought that there might be a shortage, and if so, to see what we can do. I know that there were some reports yesterday in the news that some of the anesthesia machines that had ventilator functionality were being repurposed or looked at being repurposed elsewhere in the nation where they have those critical shortages. So I'll talk with her and see if there's a problem, and if so, whether we can do something preemptively in order to reduce the impact of that problem.
Commissioner, thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, sir.
And stay safe.
Thank you. You too, sir. All right. Any further public comment?
There's two. There was two signed up. So
Okay, perfect.
we're seeing.
Contestant number 2, come on down. It's tough to add levity into a kind of a miserable situation.
Here we go.
Hello.
Welcome.
Are you ready?
Yeah, if you just start with your name and address, or at least your name and city, I think that would be sufficient, ma'am.
Yes, I'm Sherry Freeze. I live in Melbourne.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you for having me. I just found out about this at 8 o'clock this morning, so I just wanted to come down and give my opinion on the beach closures.
Please.
Okay, so I had written a letter earlier in the week, and so I'm just going to read that because that kind of, condenses it all into one. I am writing to express my concern over the talk of the possibility of our beaches closing. I hope it is just a rumor. I myself have an autoimmune disease, and my doctor has encouraged me to go to the beach for the sun, the salt water, and salt air. I go every week if the weather cooperates. I go by myself, and an hour that I'm there de-stresses me and feels. My family is in Nashville, but we choose to stay in Melbourne, mainly for the beaches. When I was at the airport last week, I observed people going alone or with 1 or 2 other people. We all maintained our distance from each other. It is such a wonderful commodity to have in Melbourne that so many of our elderly use for their health and sanity as well. Also, I noted that last week 2 ATVs drove by us at 2 different times to ensure we were all following the guidelines set up by our government for protection against the coronavirus. I'm asking that you please not close our beaches, at least not our residential beaches. Our town has few, if any, tourists who come here for our beaches right now. Please don't let the spring breakers immaturity ruin it for those of us who need our beaches for our health. I'm happy to park across the street and walk across A1A to the beach. I will follow the guidelines you implement for beach safety. I am just asking that we keep them open. Thank you for your time, and I so appreciate what you do for our city and how you're handling this, in this crisis situation, and how you are helping to flatten the curve in a reasonable way. So I just wanted to speak for the elderly as well, who I know love to just go and, husband and wife walk the beach, and a lot of people are in Florida for that reason, snowbirds and others. I just think that it's right now for people needed to de-stress and health issues, and if we can have some kind of guidelines. I think the ATV's monitoring to make sure that there's no partying going on, no more than 10 people or whatever you want to, number you want to put to it. I think that would be the best way to do it. I'm not against closing it for the weekend. I understand, people come here from Orlando, from down south or wherever. I think that's great. I'm just saying at least a few days during the week, or,
Ma'am.
Monday to Friday, or just a few days for us would be great.
Yeah, ma'am, I appreciate your coming out. What I'll tell you is I'm actually glad to hear that the last little bit that you added there with respect to your not being opposed to it being closed during the weekend. There has not been a formal motion up to this point, and I have no intentions, unless the situation changes dramatically, of making any motion myself to close the beaches apart from the weekends. And in fact, the weekend closures aren't the entirety of the weekend. What was discussed and what was contemplated was closing the beaches Friday, Saturday, and Sunday from 11 a.m. until 4 p.m. So if you wanted to go out and enjoy a walk for an hour or two in the mornings or even the late afternoon and evening, I certainly encourage you to continue doing that. If you think that that's something that's beneficial to your health or helps you to relax, go for it. So I don't think you have anything to worry about at this juncture. Obviously, I don't want to box us in if things change and we end up with floods of people, but I respect that concern, and I think that the policy group and the folks that have been discussing it to this point have tried to take a very light-handed approach with the restrictions that are put in place. So I appreciate you coming out, ma'am.
Do you see that you might possibly close it during the weekdays and only have it open from 11 to 4? Because I like the 11 to 12 to 1 hours. That's just my own personal concern. I get more sun and all that, but,
I don't think it's happening in the near future. If it happens at all, I think it's going to be further out. Obviously, if you look at other counties, some of our neighbors like Orange County that have stay-at-home orders, we're trying not to get to a position where we fail to take smaller limitations to prevent us from having to do something like that. Realistically, though, in the next week or so, I would doubt it. I could be wrong. If we have a whole throng of tourists come in that change the situation, but I would doubt it. But I appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Is there a way to that, though, as far as, ATVs monitoring, making sure that doesn't happen?
Just, last thing before we move on. With respect to enforcement, I've spoken with our sheriff here, and then I've also spoken with our fire rescue chief, Mark Scholmeyer. And the idea is we're going to keep, regardless of whether the restrictions are in place at a particular time or not, we're going to keep our lifeguard staff, our ocean rescue staff in place. So folks certainly will be warned by Ocean Rescue. They're not going to be thrown off the beach necessarily by Ocean Rescue. I don't want our Ocean Rescue folks getting into altercations, but they're going to be issuing strong suggestions and polite warnings to folks. And if they don't follow that, then we'll contact law enforcement. And if someone needs to be reminded a little bit more clearly, we can handle it a different way. But thank you so much for coming, ma'am.
Commissioner Lober and all of the others.
Thank you. All right, so with that...
Mr. Chair, there's one more.
Oh, we got one more? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. We'll
Thank
go with
you.
the one more. Last but not least. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing me. My name is Barbara Barrett, and I live in Cape Canaveral.
Thanks for coming
I've been
out.
a local resident. Welcome. I've been a local resident here for 17 years. I've worked for the county also, and I would like to speak about the beach issues. I understand the seriousness of the pandemic. I'm a biologist by training, and right now at this time, the beaches and the parks are really the only places that I think a lot of people can feel safe and comfortable, especially people with young children and older people. I wanted to tell you a few things that I've seen, and also, if I'm allowed to make a couple suggestions to maybe help the situation. I live too far from the beach to actually walk there carrying anything. I've also seen older people drop each other off, but now the roads have barricades on them, so they're not able to do that, drop someone off of a chair. I've seen young families parking in the parking lots of the grocery stores and running with small children across A1A through traffic, trying to get to the beach. Um, I appreciate that the beaches have been kept open here, but I would like to see this board allow some access to those of us that don't live directly on the beach or right very, very close to the beach. At a time like this, there's not many places that people can go where they can feel safe with social distancing, but the beach is one. And also exposure to sunlight, fresh air. It allows us to make vitamin D under our skin, which helps our immune system. Theoretically, the beaches are open, but good luck trying to get to one of them. So if I'm allowed, I would like to make a couple of possible things that we could do, maybe even using volunteers. My thoughts are that possibly we could give some kind of pass, maybe color-coded for each town to residents of the county and allow them to park somewhere near the beach. Because right now there's nowhere to park. So, yes, there are some people that live on the beach. I think the majority of people in the county don't. That would be, my analogy would be going to the grocery store. I happen to live very close to a grocery store, so I could easily get there. But I would, it would be difficult for you if you had to park a half a mile away and then go to the grocery store to get your groceries. While I told you the grocery store is open, it wouldn't be very practical for you. And
if you want to finish your sentence, please.
My idea is to possibly have some volunteers. Maybe we could hand out colored passes in a parking lot with proof of ID. People could maybe drive through at the library or the post office, or here they could get a red card if you lived in one town, a yellow card for another town, maybe a green card, and you could let us park somewhere near the beach so that we, could go there. If you can imagine, some families are home with young children that aren't in school and park in the beach.
I apologize, but you're out of time at this point. I do want to address your concerns, though, and I do appreciate you coming out. I apologize that you didn't learn about this until 8 o'clock this morning. First, with respect to the action that the policy group took yesterday, the action that was taken in part should help with the concern about folks running across traffic. The action yesterday did not close any additional parking. It simply closes the beaches during the times that they're busiest and most filled with tourists. So it should, in that sense, favor locals. That said, with respect to differentiating between residents and non-residents on the parking, which has been closed for probably a week and a half, a week at this point, something along those lines, we can't do that, and there are a couple of reasons for it. Number one, we've received a number of grants from the state of Florida, and those grants obligate the county to treat non-Brevard residents identically to Brevard residents, so we can't show favoritism to non-residents or residents to the detriment of another group. So we don't have the opportunity or the ability to differentiate. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just very briefly with respect to the closure of the beachside parks and parking, the reason that folks are now able to socially distance on the beaches and have been over the past several days is because that particular restriction was put in place. I had calls from folks and I had pictures sent to me that showed people basically stacked on top of each other. I had heard that the conditions, and I'd seen not quite this bad, but the conditions were described to me as being like Mardi Gras or Disney during a holiday, where people, even if they wanted to do the responsible thing and go out and enjoy some fresh air, putting sunblock on so they don't develop a skin cancer, they wouldn't be able to separate from one another. So the fact that the beachside parking and beachside parks were closed is what has enabled folks to socially distance on those beaches. Again, that was a decision that was not made yesterday. That's been a longer standing decision, and I think that has enabled us to avoid further restrictions, which we might otherwise have to put in place. With respect to Cape Canaveral in particular, though, since I believe you mentioned you live there, I can tell you I've had conversations with your city staff and your elected officials. Your city is a little bit different than most in the sense that your property lines for the beachside residents extend further onto the beach itself than most of the other areas throughout the county. And in that sense, the motion that was approved yesterday by the policy group allowed folks and didn't do anything to prohibit folks from enjoying access to any property that they may own, even if it's on the beach. So if it's their private property and they want to be on the beach, that's their right. We're not looking at infringing on that. It's just the public portions. But as far as IDing folks, even if we could differentiate between residents and non-residents, we don't have any right to demand ID from folks. It's actually a point that I've discussed with the sheriff, and we're both on the same page with respect to that. Obviously, for passes, there may be a little bit of a difference, but it really does go back to the fact that countywide we have multiple parks where we have grants that don't allow us to do that. But, I think it otherwise would have been a very good idea. And I appreciate your coming out to share your thoughts. I do believe, and I hope this is comforting to a degree, that at least at present there's not a desire to formally close the beaches themselves or to add any additional restrictions unless the situation changes warranting that. But thanks again for coming out. We got another? All right. Well, so much for last but not least. All right. If you wouldn't mind, sir, if you just state your name and the city that you reside in, please.
Yeah, my name is Philip Snyder, and I reside in Palm Bay.
All right. Welcome, sir. You got the floor.
So I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to respond. I just read some criticism in local news outlets in regards to our communication as a county in regards to our response to COVID-19. I don't have a criticism myself, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to explain how are you guys going to be communicating with the citizens moving forward in regards to our response to COVID-19.
Oh, that's an easy one. Okay, so the real short answer, this was addressed. We had 2 press conferences thus far on COVID. The first press conference, we addressed specifically what our press strategy would be, and in very short order, what it is when we hit meaningful milestones, we will have press conferences out of sequence for that. We're giving press, local, regional, and otherwise, the opportunity after policy group meetings to come and ask whatever questions they may have of us. Press releases have been going out. I believe the number is to about 18,000 email addresses, and they've been going out with a degree of frequency. So the idea is to continue relatively frequent press releases, but relatively infrequent press conferences, with conferences regularly scheduled only after policy group meetings, but again, with the understanding that if we have some milestone or major announcement, that we'll call them out of sequence, as may be the case. So thank you, sir, for coming out, and I appreciate the question. That it?
Commissioner, Mr. Chair, I'd like to add EOC and Don Walker are putting up daily videos, and there'll be different levels of the videos depending on the situation, too. So there's addition going on beyond all that, too.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Any further public comment, Mr. Denninghoff? No? Okay. I guess we don't have any. So we'll go and I guess at this point get input from the various folks that are here. I'm not going to go in the order of board reports. Let's hold off on Mr. Abate and Ms. Bentley unless folks have questions they'd like to direct to them first.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Mr. Chair. I got text. We've just lost Commissioner Isnardi and Frank Abate. If you could give us some minutes to try to recover them.
Sure. I'm not gonna call for a break at this point, but let's just hold off for a moment, and we'll wait till we get him back online before we discuss any business.
Sir. Thank you.
That'll wake you up. commissioners, and then we'll circle back around to staff. Obviously, if anyone has a question for staff, they're welcome to ask, but otherwise, we'll go that way. Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, sir. I think as far as the decision's been made right now, from everything I've read in the paper and discussion with Ms. Bentley's probably moot at this point. I do want to say a couple things, and I don't want to really get in a conversation, but I want to throw out a couple of thoughts on this. Ms. Bentley, though, how long does this policy board have this type of authority?
During the emergency.
So this would happen until the president deemed we're no longer in an emergency situation?
Or the local state of emergency.
From the governor or from us?
Ours.
Okay. Commissioner Lober, I just want to say a couple things.
Sure.
Is you're chairing both boards, so you get to have a voice and opinion. But what happened yesterday, from what I listened to, is actually the commission lost all ability to have a voice. Not that we wouldn't have maybe voted with that, and I understand your reasoning from what you said, and I do trust your heart, and you're a good guy.
Thank you.
But the concern here is that as we went through it, and I listened to the whole thing, I've been listening to these for a while, is that although the vote went that way and it was okay, the county manager, county attorney, director of emergency management, and the sheriff all voted, and when they said it, they wanted to vote to defer it to the commission meeting this morning. So they felt that there was time for this commission to vet it in an open public forum. Not that we might not have done the same thing, but here's my concern with this, and it was my concern Tuesday. Theoretically, this board could have the ability right now to make any decision. I mean, all the way from whether we're going to put everybody in lock-in, close down all the stores. I know it's extreme, but maybe some type of martial law. I mean, this could be an extreme decision made by this board. And right now, I have great concern that the county commission, I've learned to trust this board extensively, and we don't always get along, but Commissioner Tabaya, I think you're brilliant in these situations. Commissioner Isnardi, she has great input. You, sir, have incredibly great input, and Commissioner Smith. So right now, I feel like this board has almost been made moot on the ability to make decisions directing the county on these types of items that typically would have been an ordinance vote. And I don't know that waiting 8 more hours would have made a big difference. And again, if this board would have voted that, I would have had great comfort and respect with that decision. And in the midst of that, again, I don't know where we would have voted, but I would have totally had great comfort in it. And I had the sheriff saying he thought he had pretty much control of it. When he asked questions during that meeting, everybody said that the numbers were well down. And again, the number one objective is to keep everybody safe and well in this county to the best of our ability. But on that also, what the president said is the cure not being worse than the actual virus. If we are not very, very cautious in what we're doing, we could make a bigger mess than the virus could as far as recovery to families. We already have many families without jobs. And I get every day people saying, close down the county, close down the county. And when I ask them all questions, they're all retired or work for the government, and they have no fear of losing income. I have many families, and we talked about this Tuesday, small businesses, they have zero income. And they've been promised now of getting money in May, but you try feeding your family on money you're getting in May. So, and again, that might be something we have to do. It might be something that's appropriate. But I want to give great warning to this policy board that any of these decisions that typically would be made by the county commission, that you guys get ahead of it and think we might be coming to this decision, call an emergency commission meeting, and let this thing be vetted through this commission in a public forum as best as we can before we start making any decisions. I probably wouldn't have said this much before, but after listening to that meeting on Thursday, and not that I don't respect all those people, I got great concern that many decisions could be made that I just feel like that this commission should be having a input on. Because at the Tuesday meeting, it was also said that before this policy board would vote, they would definitely get the input of the commission even before they put out publicly their decision. So I just wanted to state those things. Again, it's moot at this point, probably should come up in another meeting. But I thought that was important to say publicly. I can't talk to the other commissioners, but I wanted them to understand my thoughts.
No, I appreciate it. And I'll just respond very briefly, if that's all right with you. Yeah, just very briefly, yeah, and I'm going to try not to be repetitive with any of it here. So, you did mention some fine folks who voted in the minority on this, but I want to mention some of the folks that voted in the majority. We had our true health expert on that, the administrator.
I know, Commissioner Lober.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, though, but they might have
Sure.
voted for it differently, but they did defer to the commission being able to have an input. And that's my struggle, not so much the vote, but that the commission didn't get input when we had a meeting this morning. And so they obviously felt like waiting on the commission today would have been okay. And
Sure.
I just want to say that, and I don't want to beat up the people who voted the other way. I just wanted to state my thought on this because this is the only time I get a voice
No,
on this.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. And I think that perhaps, one of the questions you may have is to revisit the emergency management plan if you think that other folks have too much of a voice with respect to this. Right, and I understand. I think, and I defer to Ms. Bentley or Mr. Bate with respect to the emergency management plan having been put together in such a way that it's contemplated that whoever is representing the board represents the entire board. Whoever represents the cities represents all of the cities, regardless of what their individual title is. So Scott Morgan, regardless of the fact that he's city manager of West Melbourne, represents all of the municipalities throughout the
I know that,
the
sir, and
county.
I'm not
Well, this-
debating that, or
Sure.
even that you're not doing what you think is right. All I'm saying is for these types of votes that typically would have come before the county commission, and I think there was time to, I heard you guys discussing doing burn bans, commission decision. I heard you guys starting to discuss whether you're going to limit how many people are in cars. That should really be coming in here and being vetted out. So my concern is, and I'm just giving y'all warning, is
Sure.
that you slow it down and you think through that, because I think, not that I don't trust you guys, but Commissioner Tabaya, Commissioner Isnardi, you, Commissioner Smith, and myself were elected to represent all 5 districts.
Of course.
And not that these people aren't wonderful, but we are the elected body. And this EOC board was put together, I'm the policy board, but typically it's been for emergency situations. You have an explosion or hurricane. We have never faced this before, so I know we're new territory, and I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm just trying to give warning here because I see we could have a real problem that would really do a disadvantage to the government system that we have in place. And I just
Sure.
want to say that. But I understand what you're saying, and you've said a lot, and I don't disagree with the things you have to say, and I really know you're smart, and I'm not trying to pick on any of your opinions, but this is my opinion, and
I
I just
appreciate
wanted
that.
to state it today.
No, I appreciate that, but this is what I'm saying is as much for the benefit and the edification of the public as it is for anyone else. So even if you're completely aware of everything that I'm saying, I respect that, but I think the public needs to hear it because all of the public may not be as well aware as folks are that live this life. So with respect to that, I do want to address the burn bans and the potential limitations on the number of folks in cars. I can tell you none of those were even brought to a motion. So, I think there was a very good understanding on the policy group's part of what really is their role and what really is not their role. The fact of the matter is that the county, in having put together its emergency management plan, delegated certain responsibility and certain authorities to the policy group so that it can respond quickly when there isn't time to do other things. With respect to the folks that voted the majority, again, we had the Florida Department of Health Administrator, who's a nurse practitioner, who was appointed to that position from Tallahassee. We had our emergency management director. We had our fire chief. We had me, and we had someone representing all of the cities, Scott Morgan. So, you had a very good list of folks. The other side has a very good list of folks. What I can tell you is that the cities universally, and this was said during the meeting that I believe you mentioned you were listening in on, the cities universally, to the last one, did not want this to wait till today. I am afraid that if we start disregarding the will of the members of the policy group that represent large constituencies, that we're not going to keep those relationships with them. So I agree, and I've said even on Tuesday that if it's possible to have BOCC input, that I would like to have BOCC input, but there are certain decisions that can't wait. So regardless of whether a minority of folks on the BOCC felt that this should have come back to the commission this morning, it would have been impossible or highly impractical to have any kind of an effective strategy for implementing an 11 a.m. decision for a 10 a.m. meeting.
Well, sir, I don't know if it was the minority of the commission that asked that. I think we all had stated that at Tuesday's meeting. And again, I don't disregard the people that voted for it, but I know I'm not on my own as far as thinking this could have come here. And again, if you had to make quick emergency decisions like, you got to close a property down because of this, or, you got a water main break, got to do this. But I think you're starting to tip into areas where I think, and again, I have no ability to do this right now. If you guys want to start doing zoning decisions, there's nothing we can do.
No one's going to do that.
I know, but it could happen because I think we found a loophole in this policy board as far as what I think was the intent and the purpose of this policy board. And again, there's nothing I can do about this decision, not that I wouldn't have maybe voted with this decision, but I feel like some of the respect for the commission and our jobs of what we do here as a duty has kind of lost its ability to do its job. And I just want stated again, there's not a thing we can do again till this crisis is over, but I do have a concern with this, and that's really all I want to say about this right now. So
Sure,
I'm going to quit.
I do want to correct one thing, though, that I believe may have been misunderstood. No, I've never said that a minority of the BOCC has to have input. What I was saying was a minority of the policy group thought that this was something that could wait. A majority of the policy group appeared to think that this could not wait until today. I can tell you, and I'll just bring it up right now so that anyone that wants to chime in can chime in about something that potentially may happen in the future. I believe I was pretty open about the fact that we were discussing beach closures. Anyone that wanted to bring this up on Tuesday's county commission meeting, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just stating my opinion, anyone that wanted to bring it up, be it a commissioner or a member of the public, had absolute ability to bring this up on Tuesday. With respect to their thoughts, whether it was a good idea, bad idea, I want to focus again on the fact that no one on this commission has criticized any of the individual decisions of the policy group. This is a criticism over a philosophy of what authority the policy group ought to have. And that's something that, again, if someone wants to revisit it, that's fine. I have absolutely no objection to that. But I'll put another one on the table that may or may not come to pass that's probably going to be the next step, if there is a next step. I've had numerous constituents that have expressed concern that we've been taking measures to restrict beach access, largely on account of having too many tourists and folks fleeing high infection areas and areas with more severe restrictions in place, like stay-at-home orders. I've even heard that we have non-local, I haven't verified this, but I've heard that we have non-local flight crews self-isolating in our hotels. That is horrifying to me. That is unacceptable to me. I don't want to continue to restrict access to the beach. I think what we've done is enough. But I also have no desire to take an authoritarian step that other counties have taken, or a more authoritarian step, like Orange County with their stay-at-home order. If our hand is forced and we have to take some additional action to prevent visitors from coming into Brevard County and infecting our population, I'd rather take steps that laser target those particular visitors as opposed to punishing our residents for something that they can't control. So to that end, as of yesterday, I asked Eden to begin looking at, not doing anything to implement, but looking at our ability to prevent hotels from accepting new reservations during the declared state of emergency. I've also asked her to look at the legality, again, not to say we're doing it, but to see what the options are, of directing hotels to cancel stays of those who came here since the local state of emergency was enacted. I've also asked her to look at reasonable exceptions that we might want to include should we take either of those actions. And I do want to point out Monroe County, Dade County, there are other counties that have apparently already done this, at least to varying degrees. So just as with beach closures, the more counties across the state that close their hotels, the more people will be driven here to the county with open hotels, amplifying the problems. And I don't think we need to get to a point where we are the last county in the state to close them. Again, not to say that we need to do that at this point. I think it's premature. But again, we have to protect our citizens' health and freedoms. My strong preference is to avoid any further restrictions on our own citizens, on our own residents, if we can accomplish those goals and accomplish keeping public safety in good stead by focusing on visitors until the situation improves. So anyone that wants to weigh in on that, you certainly have ample notice at this point. It's not even been discussed or hinted to the policy group that that's something that I've thought of or had discussions about. So please, if you love it, mention it. If you hate it, mention it. And I guarantee you that your input will be taken to the policy group. It's not going to be a secret to them. No one's trying to hide the ball. No one's trying to be authoritarian. The fact is, as it was explained to me by staff, and maybe I misunderstood, and if that's the case, I invite anyone on staff to correct me. The purpose of the policy group is to take swift action when it cannot wait to come back to the county commission. The county commission has delegated a degree of its authority, its decision-making ability to the policy group. The point is, we have Brevard Public Schools, we have the cities represented, all of our municipalities, we have the Florida Department of Health represented, we have BCSO represented, we have a slew of agencies and partners represented on that group. We have a disproportionate lion's share of control given the number of county staff and the fact we have an elected official. But the point is, it was contemplated, as was explained to me, as taking action limited to the particular emergency at hand without having to be obligated to follow all of the various rules that the county commission would have to follow in order to take action. I don't get any joy out of chairing this. The fact of the matter is it's been one no-win decision after another, and whatever we've done, or if we don't do anything at all, it'll be criticized. There are going to be people that want us to stick our head in the sand and say this is a joke, it's a cold, there's nothing we need to do, why are we making a big deal about nothing? We'll also have other people that say lock them in their houses, and if they leave, shoot them. We're not doing either of those things. Everything we've tried to do has been measured, and I think the fact that no one on the commission has criticized any of the specific decisions that we've made as a policy group speaks to how effective the policy group has been. So with that said, again, pardon me, I'm open to looking at the role of the policy group. If someone else on the commission doesn't believe that I've done an effective job chairing it, I am happy to hand the reins over to anyone on the commission that wants to chair it. So I'm not being facetious. I'm not trying to be nasty or sarcastic, but anyone that wants to chair it, I will second the motion myself or pass the chair and make it to put anyone that wants to chair it as chair of that group. I am happy to do that. So again, I think everyone is trying to make the best they can out of a difficult situation. As was mentioned, it is unprecedented. This would be akin to our having a radiological incident as a result of a launch. The fact is, even though it is atypical, and even though this is not something that traditionally the policy group is experienced with, or even emergency management is experienced with, it's something that falls within the scope of the policy group. Everyone is working with each other as well as possible. I think we've had great partnerships. We've been able to, as a result of the policy group in large part, been able to get more supplies directed to Brevard County, and that's not something that gets publicized by any of the media. The fact is we have more test kits here as a result of the communications between local and state elected officials that are now roped in as a result of my having brought them in, and I'm not patting myself on the back. It is what it is. It's a fact. As a result of our having roped them into the policy group, not to vote, but to give their input and have a say. I have not prevented anyone on the commission from calling into those policy group meetings. And if they wanted to reach out separately to any of the other or all of the other policy group members except me as a result of Sunshine, they can do that. They can reach out, and I encourage you to reach out. Please reach out to everyone on the policy group and let them know what your thoughts are with anything that you hear, even rumblings may or may not be coming in the future. So again, I apologize for being a little bit high-strung with respect to this, but it's a tense situation, and I really do believe that there's a lot of criticism that doesn't take into account the fact that this policy group is operating as was contemplated, as is contemplated by emergency management planning. If the plan needs to be modified, the plan needs to be modified, but to do that, to suggest that something's not functioning because we're following the plan as the plan was intended, I don't know if that's something that's terribly beneficial. But if you have anything further, I'm going to give everyone their opportunity to fully ventilate. Yes, ma'am. All right, Commissioner Tabaya.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this meeting.
Yes, sir.
I certainly respect the policy group's decision and do acknowledge it. I also respect the city's decisions, who seem as though many of them, at least a couple of them, Cocoa Beach and you mentioned Satellite Beach, that were going to close their beaches regardless. I certainly would like to hope the cities wouldn't go as far as that act would give them authority. A second-degree misdemeanor, what that means is $500 fine, and more importantly, up to 60 days in jail. So this is the decision I want you to understand. Again, that's the authority of the city. I'm glad I don't sit on either one of those city boards, because that's the last thing I want to do. But what I have done is I listened to the sheriff. I listened to a number of city officials. I even had my opponent in this upcoming race pick up the phone and give me a call and talk to me about what the concerns of her constituents were, and I greatly appreciate that, as we share many of them. So I've been to the beaches, and the beaches that I've been to, it seems as though people have been respectful, maintaining social distancing protocol. I have not seen Mardi Gras-like activities on the beaches that I've seen. Chairman Randy Fine has done live updates on Facebook where he's walked down the beach and you couldn't see someone for a great distance. I think what this comes down is to resources. And so we're tasked, my understanding is, with 4 decisions here. 3, but we'll call them 4. The first decision, and I imagine this is where you're leaning based on what you've said and where this meeting is going, is to do nothing pursuant to the policy group's decision. The second would be to support the decision or affirm the decision of the policy group. The third one would, my understanding, be to decline to enforce. Tell the sheriff that there are more important public safety needs out there that we would appreciate that he would focus in on. As you've mentioned before, the sheriff was in the negative when it came to vote, and I know that you corrected Commissioner Pritchett, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to correct you on that. A majority did not vote in favor of that. It was a 5-4 vote, and I know what you're saying is 5 is more than 4, but you said a majority of the policy group. The policy group is 10 people. There was 1 person absent. So, in fact, it was a majority of the people that voted. It was not, in fact, a majority of the policy group. I know it's semantics, but if you're going to pick on Commissioner Pritchett's semantics, I think it's only fair.
I would never pick on her.
And the fourth one would be an emergency ordinance. And from my understanding of an emergency ordinance is it's not something that we can do on a dime. We have to write it, we have to publish it, it has to be mailed out. So the impact of an emergency ordinance would not come into play until after this was out there. So I've weighed all 4 of these decisions. I think the most wise one would be decision 3, to inform the sheriff to decline to enforce the policy group's decision. I do not want to see any of my constituents, certainly any of your constituents, many elderly folks that are just out there for fresh air by themselves, being handed a citation or being charged with a second-degree misdemeanor. You know this better as an attorney than I do. 60 days in jail. I mean, that's the decision that is being made. So I have a motion. The motion would be direct staff to decline to allocate resources to enforce closure of the beaches consistent with the policy group's decision made on March 26, 2020, and request that Brevard County Sheriff's Office similarly choose to use its resources to maximize public safety rather than the closure of safe public beaches. And to take this a step, to stake this a step further, I would I would not tell the sheriff what to do. However, I've spoken with the sheriff on this. I mentioned that I would be making this motion, and he was in support of it. So I'm not trying to enforce that. This is one that I've made in concert with him, just to be clear.
All right, let me before we call the question on that. Yeah, I heard there was a second from Commissioner Smith on the line as well. Thank you, Commissioner Pritchett. Just a couple thoughts as we discuss that.
Before you go on, Commissioner Wilburn, I apologize for this.
Yes, ma'am.
I know you called this emergency meeting typically on a day of my unavailability on a Friday where I work and see patients. So I was really torn between my duties as a government official, my duties in taking care of a population that thinks they may have the virus. So a little bit torn on both ends. I just don't have a ton of time. I managed to block out a section of my schedule, so I have to leave at 11:20. So if there's going to be a vote and additional discussion, and I would like at least to provide some input if possible.
Yes, ma'am.
If there's going to be a vote and some additional discussion, I'd like that at least wrapped up by then.
Yes, ma'am.
So I can at least do my part.
We'll take out of order in just a few moments here, if that's okay.
I just didn't anticipate this much discussion, because since we weren't really, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to cut what I was going to say down to an absolute minimum. With respect to what Commissioner Tabaya had mentioned with the second-degree misdemeanor, and this, even Florida Today, God forbid, I say they got something right. Even Florida Today correctly printed that my intention is not to have anyone in the jail on account of this. I have spoken with the sheriff offline, and the goal is essentially only if they refuse to leave to arrest them. So this isn't someone's grandmother that just doesn't understand, or someone's grandmother that may have stayed out a little too long. The idea is that Ocean Rescue or Brevard County Fire Rescue folks would warn them if they refuse to obey the warning or the request from Ocean Rescue. Then law enforcement would come out. They would make a second request that the folks leave, and only if they refuse at that point would they be arrested. So I think that's pretty even-handed. If we had one person in jail, I would think it's someone trying to prove a point to be a test case on something like this. I don't think anyone who could end up in jail is a legitimate misunderstanding, given that they'd have two opportunities to leave. I will tell you, you mentioned Representative Randy Fine. Representative Randy Fine certainly supported the decision that was made yesterday. And with respect to voting on this, I said I would keep it short. Last thought is, consider the message that this would send our partners in the policy group if we direct folks to take actions contrary to what the policy group has implemented. So with that, Commissioner Isnardi.
And I guess I'll just lead in with that statement. You said consider what the policy group thinks. I'm getting a lot of feedback. It says to consider what the policy group thinks. Well, the policy group, other than two of the members, are not elected. We're the ones that are accountable. We're the ones that the residents look to. We're the ones that they call, either for or against this. And I think it was pretty clear in our last meeting, although we may not have discussed speech closure directly or individually, that any big decisions should come to the board. At least that was my position, and I believe the position of most of the members of our board. So again, you have a bunch of bureaucrats on that board telling our residents what they think is best for them, and some of them have expertise, and I give them that, and they're all professionals. But ultimately, we are the ones accountable for those decisions, whether they would agree with the decision of the policy board or not. So again, this is one of those things. 5 hours, 8 hours wouldn't have mattered. I mean, for them not to even, and for you not to include in your motion contingent upon approval commission. I mean, you say that you only had an hour, you would have only had an hour to implement, but that's only an hour to implement based on the hours that the policy board set. So you could have easily implemented that for Saturday and Sunday if we were going to move forward with speech closures. I just think it's a knee-jerk move because we're getting a lot of pressure for people to shelter in. And because of that, because it is such a contentious issue, it should have been brought back to the elected body without a doubt, without even question, only because then we would have been the ones to be able to make that decision and the ones accountable to the people whose lives it's affecting the most, because both people on both sides of it are passionate. And the truth of the matter is we don't have enough information. And if the beach attendance is down 75%, people are already adhering to the social distancing. I find it hard to even fathom an idea, and I know that one of the policy group members had said, oh, everybody's going to come to Brevard Beach on spring break. That would mean that they would have to figure out exactly which one. They would have to drive across the state just to find out which one's a county beach versus a city beach, and then try to all, accumulate there and just have a big spring break party. I think that's a bit crazy. I think that we are being a little overreaching, and I just think that this is a bad decision without more information. If the beaches were having a problem, yes, we need to look at it a lot more closely, but we're not having a problem at the beaches. That's not the information I'm getting back. So I think the beaches is probably one of the safer places to be if everybody's doing their social distancing. So, I'm with Commissioner Tabaya, and I'm glad you brought it up because these are discussions that I had yesterday myself after hearing this item pass the policy board, the unelected, for the most part, policy board. After hearing this and before I decide to take anybody's rights away, I agree with Commissioner Tobias, so I'll be supporting that. And I don't need a big discussion telling me why I'm wrong. I'm telling you my position based on all of the information, based on having served on this commission, based on the feedback I'm getting from my residents, the feedback from staff, and whether we intended to or not. No one's criticizing the policy group's decisions in the past, because the policy group in the past has never quite overreached like this. And yes, some of the policy group's decisions have been criticized in the past with previous disasters, maybe not as publicly as this. But, you know, you're one person on that board. And of the two elected people on that board, you and Sheriff Ivey, you guys disagreed on this. So that's, you know, all the more reason it should have come back to our board. And then we're responsible for that decision. People like it or they don't. It would have been us that made that decision. So
Sure, no,
I'm with
absolutely.
Commissioner Tobias. I definitely don't want to use sheriff's resources to police the beaches. I mean, again, if they were a problem, I would be more sympathetic to it, but they're just not a problem. We're asking for a problem just because we want the public to think, oh, we're doing everything we can to protect you for 5 hours out of the day. I mean, if you're going to do it, you're either going to go in all in or you're going to not do it at all. But this gesture and this overreach, it's all bad. So obviously I'm passionate about it, but that's my position. So, and I know your position, so I don't want to argue about it.
Sure, and I'm not going to argue.
I respect your position, and I understand you're not in an easy spot either, but this was overreach.
Sure, and I'm not going to argue, but I think it's important that I state why it is that I disagree, and I'm not trying to change your position or
But we know
criticize
why you
it.
disagree, Commissioner Lober. You said it. You've been talking for an hour, and I appreciate it, and that's nice, but I don't have a lot of time on this line. So if we're going to vote on something, I'd appreciate a vote. Or I'll call the question from here.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the question.
I'll call the
So-
question.
Let's go for it. So all in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'll go nay. So motion passes 4-1. So with that now done, I do want to get across what I was going to say earlier.
Mr. Chair, can I get a word in here? As Commissioner has already said, you've been talking for an hour.
Sure. And again, sir, if there's some criticism or some concern that's directed to you, I would certainly allow you to respond and then, you know, move things in that order. So I promise you, I will give you your chance to say whatever it is that you'd like to say. But again, the fact that this was done over a limited number of hours, I don't want people to think that the policy group is doing things just willy-nilly or to make people feel better. The fact is that it was designed with the times that were put in place, the time restrictions and the day restrictions to target specifically when tourists would come over. Tourists generally aren't going to drive here at 6 in the morning to be able to stay out for a few hours. The idea was by closing it at 11 o'clock, residents that want to walk the beach are able to walk the beach in the morning, but you're not going to get folks driving from Orlando, driving from other counties. As far as us, you know, not having a problem at the beach, I agree. There's not a problem right now. And the reason that attendance is down 75% is because of the actions of the policy group. Anyone that thinks otherwise is just deluded. The fact is we closed beachside parking. Our closure of beachside parking, that specific act, that one act, reduced the attendance dramatically. If we didn't do that, you would have those Mardi Gras conditions. You would be seeing those Mardi Gras conditions again, because that's what we had before. So the stay-at-home order that's been implemented, I believe it went into effect at least in one or more counties last night. That's the concern. I don't want to wait for us to have a problem in hand and say, well, we don't have a problem, so we don't have to do anything. But now we have a problem, so now we can act. Now that we have people transmitting a virus to one another, now we can go ahead and act. We decided to wait until there was an issue, and now that's what we've done. So, you know, with that said, I respect everyone's decision. I understand where you're coming from. You know, I certainly will implement the decisions of this board to whatever degree I have to implement. If I need to sign something, I'll be signing it. But I disagree vehemently. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, sir. I don't want to be too loud. I was holding the phone too close last week. I've spent a lot of time over the last several days gauging the thoughts of city managers and mayors that live and manage each side. And my thoughts have been that the county should worry about the county, because all of these cities, they can make their own minds up as to whether they want to close their beach. It's their beaches, and they're the ones that are responsible for enforcing their closures. And if they have a problem that arises, they can address it immediately because it's their beach and it's their law enforcement agency. I think the county doesn't need to be in the business of telling them what they can and can't do. That's number one. Going forward, I think we need, as a commission, to look at the makeup of the policy group, not as the people that are on it, but the direction that it has. Because I think that it was constituted with the idea that there would be a short-term emergency, perhaps like a rocket blows up or we have a 3 or 5 day hurricane event, and then the policy group goes home. It's an emergency. This situation, I'm sure, was never envisioned that the policy group would be sitting making decisions for the county for 2 or 3 weeks or more. So I think what we need to do is consider that and maybe rewrite the direction of the policy group and go to Tallahassee or with our representatives, however this is going to occur. But we need to say something to the effect that during the course of a short-term emergency, and it could be defined as short-term could be 3 to 10 days or any reasonable number. And then beyond that, the policy group would release or relinquish their authority and powers to the Brevard County Board of County Commissioners. Because I can tell you, and I'm sure the other commissioners have heard it as well, my staff and myself, when I'm out at Publix or wherever, we've fielded numerous calls and emails questioning, well, who the heck is this policy group? I didn't elect the policy group to make decisions for me. I've heard that over and over again. And I'm empathetic with what they're saying. I understand why the policy group is in place. Obviously, it's to deal with an emergency. In a situation like this, we're still in an emergency situation because of the governor and the president, but it's a long-term thing. And I think we need to get the Board of County Commissioners involved in the decision-making. And just on that same note, I'm just going to say that I'm really concerned because what we've seen here has changed the dynamics of the way I view my country. Every other situation we've had in my term here on earth, anytime the country had a difficult time, whether it be 9/11 or hurricanes, it always brought out the best in people. This is bringing out the worst in people. And I hope we haven't crossed that line, that we've become so selfish that we only think of ourselves instead of our fellow citizens.
I agree with you on that last point. You know, I do want to say, Commissioner Smith, that even those folks on the county umbrella who voted against the motion that was proposed yesterday voted against that motion, as I understand it, because they wanted this board to have an input for the reasons that were articulated by most, if not all, of the other commissioners here. They didn't vote against it because they thought that we should act independently from the cities. Every single staff member, from our public safety director who's sitting feet away from me, to our emergency management director, all of them that I spoke with suggested that we need to have a unified front with respect to the beaches. Because again, the issue is when some are closed and others are open, people will concentrate in the ones that are open. And I respect Commissioner Isnardi, but my concern isn't that we're going to have people doing research and Googling things in Orlando to decide which are county beaches and which are municipal beaches. They're going to understand that there's some beaches that are open here. They're going to come here. If one is barred, they're just going to move north or south. And the next one that's open, guess where they're going to go? They're going to go there. So the issue, and I just would urge you to look into this, and I will as well, with ceding some of the authority from the policy group or clawing back some of the authority from the policy group and reattributing that to the county commission, is we have notice requirements that I don't believe any of us were aware of on Tuesday to call even an emergency meeting of the county commission. So the policy group, we can convene a policy group meeting in 5 minutes, in 15 minutes, if that's what we need to do. Now, I would try to give folks as much notice as possible. So, for instance, yesterday when I got a call in the morning, we didn't set the policy group meeting until 3 p.m. so that we could get as many people as possible on that call. As Commissioner Tabaya pointed out, we had one person missing, one person out of roughly 10. I'm not saying that's the best in the world, but that's not bad for a meeting that had, let's say, 12 hours notice, if that. So the Board of County Commissioners, we don't have the ability to convene a meeting with less than 24 hours notice. So I would be very cautious that we don't do something to solve a problem and put ourselves in a worse position. Again, I'm happy to entertain any change as far as the philosophy of where power should lie with respect to decisions that last a long period of time. But again, the reason that the decision the policy group implemented was a 3-day decision was so that the board could have input for the following weekend, and so that even the policy group could consider what happens over this weekend to determine whether or not it's worth doing in the future. So, again, I'll respect the will of the board. If the board doesn't want to see the beaches closed for the following weekend, regardless of what happens this weekend, we simply won't take a vote on it. That's the impression I'm getting. I'm not going to vote for it in the future. And again, it's not because I don't think it's a smart idea. I do think it's a smart idea, but my service on the policy group is designed to reflect the wishes of the Board of County Commissioners. So if it's clear to me, as is the case, that the Board of County Commissioners doesn't want the beach closed now, then fine, I won't close the beach, despite my feeling that that's not necessarily something that I would go the same way as my colleagues have in this case. So,
and I don't have a button to hit, so I'm just going to interrupt.
Please.
I'm sorry. Won't close the beaches, but you're one vote. You're the only elected, other than the sheriff, on that board. So you can say you won't close the beaches or you won't make a decision like this again, but that policy group may. You said at the beginning of the meeting that the policy group members of the policy group expressed concern that the Board of County Commissioners may be intruding on the intent of the group. Well, if this is their intention, is to act on their own like this and make a decision that we should be making, then yeah, they should be concerned, because I'm concerned about those decisions without coming to us first. So I'll just leave it there and just say, obviously I appreciate that you're going to bring our intentions forward. You're still one vote on a 10-member board.
Duly noted. Commissioner Pritchett?
Commissioner Lober, I just want to say I know you do have a tough decision, and I know you're really doing what you believe doing, so this isn't personal at all.
Sure. No, I don't take it that way.
Commissioner Isnardi, I totally agree with you. I think the policy board did overreach, because I heard at the beginning of the meeting, it was stated many times that the commission wanted to hear this. And I even heard one time someone said, well, we can vote on this. If we vote it, the commission can't do anything to change what we vote. So I had great heartburn with a couple of those statements. And again, not that I don't respect the policy board, but I think it could have waited a few hours to come here. I agree with Commissioner Isnardi on that. This should have been one of those things we talked about Tuesday that really should have come before this commission. What I did hear in that meeting is the sheriff asked the beaches the questions: are you having lower numbers? Yes. Do you feel like you have any problems with control of crowds right now? No. And I do believe the beach of Cape Canaveral asked that they please were not included in this. They did not want to close their beach. But I do agree that as we close something that's pushing somewhere else, they closed the Play Linda Beach up in Titusville. And what that did do was cram everybody down the Indian River piled together, because people are needing some type of outlet. So the sheriff brought that up. People need some outlet outside if they're separated. This is a good scenario. Typically, when I've gone on vacations and it's rained, all the stores fill up with people. So I don't know how to weigh all this, but the sheriff stated, I think I've got this under control. I can have people out there watching the beaches so that we are able to take care of this. So his comments in this meant a lot to me when I was listening to the information. Again, I want to throw out, I think the policy board does serve a purpose in those times of immediate situations. But again, these things, this could have waited till today, and the buck does stop here with this commission. It's what we're elected to do. And so all of the input put in by the fellow commissioners, I do agree with, because the things that we can do here, it's better because it's vetted publicly by the elected board that's elected to make these decisions.
No, and you have an excellent point, especially with respect to Cape Canaveral. I'll tell you, I spoke with Wes Morrison, who's one of the councilmen up there. I received some input from Todd Morley and Mayor Hogue. With respect to that input, I specifically included a reference prior to Scott Morgan's motion. I specifically ensured that he clarify that this would not impact individuals' property rights as far as any portion of the beach that may fall on their sand, any portion of sand that may fall on their property, pardon me. And the reason for that is Cape Canaveral, as I mentioned earlier, has a disproportionate, a larger area for most of the property owners into the beach that would otherwise perhaps intrude into the public portion. So that was a concern that they had. Also, in speaking with Wes, he was more favorable toward having 3-day restrictions with partial hours as opposed to just shutting it all together. So this wasn't, I think the original intent may have been much broader in closing the beaches, period. Not necessarily with hour restrictions or even with hour restrictions across the week. So this is something I just don't want folks that may not be familiar with the workings of the policy group to get the idea that the policy group is trying to do things for the purpose of grabbing power or to exert authority. These folks, I mean, these are especially the folks that aren't elected, which is the bulk of the policy group. These aren't folks with political aspirations. These are folks who live in the community, who have individuals they have to report to who are elected officials oftentimes, if not always, and they're trying to do the best that they can to keep our citizens safe. I think the important thing to take home is we all have the same goal of keeping our citizens safe without doing things that infringe on their rights. So, you know, again, I think it's important that we try to have a good working relationship with the cities, even if we don't necessarily agree, or even if all of us don't necessarily agree with the direction the cities are headed toward. So again, I would leave it at that, but is there anything further from anyone? Ms. Bentley, Mr. Abate? Mr. Abate?
Yeah, I'm here. I just have something when we get to reports, that's all.
Yeah, let's consider this reports. Oh, Commissioner Tabaya, hang on one sec, Mr. Abate. I see a light from Commissioner Tabaya.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I can't imagine the position you're in. We're playing armchair quarterback here, and you know, as you move forward, I know you go there with many constituencies. So here's my 2 cents. And of course, I stole this from someone, but I always keep it in the back of my mind. But when we give up, I'm sure you've heard of this, liberty to purchase temporary safety, we deserve neither liberty nor safety. I mean, Benjamin Franklin said that 200 years ago. I want you to think about that as we move forward. When you think of kicking people out of hotels, I'm in a hotel tonight. I'm doing that. You know, my floors are being polished right now. So there are many unintended consequences. So I know you're looking for safety, and I greatly appreciate that. But just think about the liberty that you would be taking away from people, and the position that you'd be putting the sheriff in to pull over cars that had, you know, 2 or 3 people in it.
That was never proposed by anyone.
Well, if this is the direction that it goes, you know, as you move forward, just please keep that in the back of your mind, you know, as you make decisions. But most importantly, I thank you for the role. You're clearly in a no-win situation, and a situation that I greatly appreciate you putting on your shoulders.
I appreciate that. And as far as the question with respect to civil liberties, I would encourage you, oftentimes, whether it's an election or whether it's any other choice, you have alternatives. The question is not, is this in and of itself of particular value? It's of the options that are available, what is the best option for us to choose? If you look at what some of our neighboring counties like Orange have done with these authoritarian stay-at-home orders, my goal is to avoid doing something like that. I think that we are either the least or one of the least restrictive counties in the state of Florida, certainly along the beach side, with respect to what we've done in responding to this crisis. I have gotten far more criticism from my constituents that we're not doing enough than that we're doing too much. So I can tell you, as far as the quote, I've heard it. I think it was misattributed to Ben Franklin or to some other relatively noteworthy individual from back in the day. I don't know who actually said it, but I have heard that in the past. Believe me, I think that's on the forefront of everyone's mind. And in fact, it's something that came into play even on the decision to close the beaches for 3 days for the limited number of hours, so that we allowed residents the chance to use them when it's safer to do so. No one's trying to take anyone's rights away willy-nilly. You know, thank God we're not dealing with Ebola or something along those lines, simply because that quote would go out the window were that to be the case. We can allow people to have liberty with a 60% fatality rate or whatever the case may be with something like that. I think that everyone's trying to take measured responses where it's not simply a do everything or do nothing approach. But as I said, and it's a standing offer with respect to anyone on the board that would like to chair the policy group, I am happy to cede the reins to anyone on the board that either thinks they can do better or that thinks that they have ideas or access to information that I don't. And again, I'm not being facetious or critical or anything. It's a legitimate offer for anyone on the board that wants to do that. So again, if you want to take it today, make a motion. I'll second it. We'll vote on it and you'll have it. Or if you want to take it at some point in the future during this local state of emergency, make the motion. And unless something crazy comes up between now and then, I would intend to second it then as well. Anything further? All right. Seeing nothing further, we'll adjourn at 11:25. Oh, Mr. Pate, we will not adjourn at 11:25.
Okay.
Sir, I apologize.
Thank you, Commissioner. What I wanted to just briefly mention in the report is that our Public Information Officer, Don Walker, in addition to the press releases that you've described earlier and the press conferences that have been occurring, he is also producing short video clips that provide updated synopsis of what's occurring in Brevard County relating to the corn virus, as well as answering questions that are posed by residents on social media sites. These videos that he's producing are just a couple of minutes each, and they are available on the county's website under our emergency management Facebook page. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention.
I appreciate that, sir. And let me actually, just another brief thought, and if folks want me to do this, I'm happy to do it. Would my fellow commissioners like me to call a meeting of the policy group later on this afternoon? And I'm happy to move to have them reconsider the decision that they made as well, so that at least we'll appear to be a bit more unified.
That might be comfortable if they would do that now that the county commission's been able to put in input.
Colonel Wallace, do you mind? All right, I'm getting the thumbs up for purposes of the minutes. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll convene at 3 o'clock.
Commissioner?
Commissioner Smith?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did have one thing I wanted to add in a board report. I wanted to give a shout out to Don Walker and particularly Logan and the rest of the group that have put the logistics for the sound and the video for these meetings. It's got to be a nightmare for them to do things on the fly and get it to work and work well. So I just want to give a big shout out to them for a job well done.
And I want to give a shout out to Sergeant Carl Sangalier, who's at the back of the room here. Want to appreciate, he's pretending to hide here, but appreciate BCSO always being of support to the various meetings and issues that we have come up with the commission, and it's certainly appreciated. So with that, we will truly adjourn this time at 11:27. Thank you all.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.